The most dangerous competitor OpenAI even faced wasn't built by Google, it wasn't built by Meta, and it wasn't built by Elon Musk. It was built by one OpenAI's own leaders. This man quit one of the most powerful companies on earth, and 14 people quit with him on the same day. But here's the twist: the company he left is now his biggest rival, worth $1 trillion, and he built half of it himself. Therefore, to understand Claude, you have to understand the man who walked out the door of OpenAI and started the company that's now beating it at its own game. This is the story of Dario Amodei, not a founder who chased a market gap, a researcher who chased a warning nobody wanted to hear. Before any of this, Dario was just a physicist turned machine learning researcher, quietly working at Google Brain, studying how neural networks scale. Not glamorous, not headline making, just numbers, curves, patterns. Then in 2015, a new lab opened its doors. It called itself OpenAI, and it wanted him. He joined. He rose fast. Within a few years, he wasn't just a researcher anymore. He was vice president of research, the person steering the direction of the lab's biggest bets. He helped lead the work behind GPT-2, then GPT-3. Two models that didn't just improve on what came before, they changed what people believed a language model could even be. The world started paying attention. Investors started paying attention. Microsoft started paying attention. But inside the building, something else was happening. Dario had spent years watching one pattern repeat itself. Make the model bigger, feed it more data, and it gets smarter, sometimes in ways nobody predicted. He believed in that pattern completely. Scaling worked. Therefore, he also understood, better than almost anyone in the building, how fast that power was compounding. And the faster it compounded, the more one question ate at him. Was anyone matching that pace with safety work? Or was safety just the department you funded quietly so you could say you had one? He didn't think it was a single moment that broke things. There was no dramatic showdown, no door slammed on camera. It was slower than that, a growing distance between how urgently he felt about alignment and how the leadership around him prioritized it. Years later, on Lex Fridman's podcast, he'd put it simply. He said it was incredibly unproductive to try and argue with someone else's vision. By 2020, the distance had become impossible to ignore. In December of that year, Dario left OpenAI. He didn't leave alone. Over the following weeks, 14 more researchers walked out with him. Engineers, scientists, people who had built careers at one of the most talked about labs on Earth. Among them was his own sister, Daniela, who had been there almost since the beginning. 15 people, no product, no funding secured, no name for the company yet. Just a shared, uncomfortable belief that building something this powerful without matching it step for step with safety research wasn't ambition. It was a gamble with the rest of the world's chips on the table. In February 2021, that belief became a company. They called it Anthropic. The name mattered to them. Daniela would later explain it was chosen to keep the focus on something simple, the humans on the other side of the technology, not just the technology itself. They weren't naive about what they were up against. OpenAI had the headlines, the funding, the head start, and now, in the eyes of some, the loyalty of the industry's most exciting talent. Anthropic had 15 people and a thesis, but they raised $124 million in seed funding on that thesis alone. Therefore, the bet had officially started. Amodei would later tell Fortune the whole split came down to one missing piece. They believed you needed something in addition to just scaling the models up. For the next year and a half, almost nobody outside the AI world knew Anthropic's name. They trained models. They published safety research. They built quietly the way Dario always had. Heads down, no press tour, no launch party. By the summer of 2022, they had something real, an AI system they called Claude, trained to be not just capable, but They hoped genuinely careful about the power it held. Therefore, in 2023, they released it to the public. And here's where the story stops being about one man's decision and starts being about a rivalry the whole industry would end up watching. Because the company Claude was now competing against head to head wasn't some outside challenger. It was OpenAI, the place Dario had spent years building GPT-2 and GPT-3 for. The place he'd walked out of with 14 colleagues and a warning nobody had wanted to act on. Reports would later describe tension between Dario and OpenAI's Sam Altman going back even further than the walkout. Disagreements over roles, over pace, over how much risk was acceptable in the pursuit of scale. But Dario never turned it into a public feud of insults. He turned it into a company. Visual, funding headlines rolling. Google, Amazon, Salesforce logos appearing one by one. Google invested, then Amazon, then Salesforce. What started as 15 people in a bare office became one of the most valuable private companies on the planet. A business now worth close to $1 trillion, built entirely on the idea that safety and capability didn't have to be enemies. Other departures from OpenAI would follow in the years after. Researchers, safety leads, even a co-founder, many of them ending up at the company Dario built. Not because he recruited them with speeches, because the thesis kept holding up. Here's the part that doesn't make it into most tech headlines. Dario Amodei didn't leave OpenAI to build a competitor. He left because he believed something specific, that the smartest room in the world had stopped agreeing on how careful to be. Therefore, he built a room of his own, one where that disagreement couldn't happen quietly in the background anymore, where it had to be the whole point. He never framed Anthropic as revenge, not once. Every public account of the split describes the same thing. A scientist who believed the technology was going to get here whether he built it or not, and decided he'd rather be the one steering it carefully than watch from outside. Today, millions of people open Claude every day and never think about any of this. They just type a question and wait for an answer. They don't see the years of quiet work that came before the product ever had a name. Because somewhere in 2020, one researcher decided that being fast wasn't enough, rather to be careful.